Today I'd like to talk to you about GMOs. GMOs are genetically modified organisms. Um, this can both be in plant and animal, and they are modified by herbicides, pesticides, and um, and hormones and antibiotics. Um, So I've been a chef in the area for about 10 years now, and putting good quality food out every day is something that's very paramount in my line of work. Um, in doing this, I've done a lot of research on where the food comes from and where or what it does to our body. In the last couple of years, there's been a farm to table kind of movement in the food industry, and that is getting smaller farms to produce foods for the local area around. Um, so today I want to give you guys some notes and some ideas on where your food's coming from, what's being done to it, and how it kind of affects you on a daily basis and what it can kind of do to your body. So first off, I'm going to let you know what a GMO is. Next, I'm going to show you who produces it and what their products are. And then finally, just a couple simple ways to avoid them if you don't want to be consuming them. All right, so first off, picking meat and vegetables and bread used to be very easy. You go into your local grocery store, you knew that the bread was coming from the bakery down the street, your meat was being raised by the farmer down the road and then butchered and put into the case that you were buying it from, and then the vegetables were doing the same. But lately, in the last 20 years, since about 1990, food has been becoming genetically modified, and that is to help it survive drought and other bugs, heat waves, things that aren't necessarily easy to plan for. So these plants and animals are called GMOs, and they are genetically modified by herbicides, pesticides on a seed that is able to grow without the bugs ever touching them, without a farmer ever putting fertilizer on it, and it's only good for one. It will never germinate and produce another seed to grow. With animals, they use viruses and bacteria and hormones to make them produce extra milk or beef up where humans consume the meat from, whether it be their hindquarters, their ribs, or the breast for consumption. So these are the 7 leading GMO companies, and that is information is provided by the non-GMO product. Monsanto, Dow, DuPont, Pioneer, Bay Crop Science, Syngenta, and BASF are all companies that in one way or another produce hormones or create these seeds that are genetically modified. So to begin with, in America, we're the only Western civilization right now that allows GMOs. Australia doesn't, the European Union and Japan don't allow these. The reason we are able to do it is because we have some pretty high-powered lobbyists that are in Washington that have the backs of these companies and have them work a way to grow in this country. In 1920, 90% of all the corn that was grown by actual farmers, whereas today, 90% of corn that is grown by corporations or people that are growing for the companies. So as you can see here, 1957, at 43 days, a chicken was about a quarter the size of what it is today. And you can see that it just continues to kind of get bigger as it matures. And this is due to the hormones that they're given and just how they are modified. And a couple ways that you can check to see like if your produce is going to be organic, conventional, or GMO is that if it starts with a 5-digit code that begins with a 9, that's organic. Never been touched by pesticide, herbicide, and grown from a natural heirloom seed. Conventional has been maybe cross-germinated or pollinated. That will start with a 4, and it will be a 4-digit code. And then finally, a GMO is a 5-digit code that starts with an 8, and that means that this plant will grow. It'll produce probably a larger fruit and have less seeds in it than any of the first two. And that'll have a 5-digit code that starts with an 8. A couple examples of other fruits that are grown like this are seedless watermelons, because watermelons cannot naturally occur. They're usually chalkier and not as sweet, not as juicy. The next would be grapes. Grapes also have seeds in them that through GMOs they cut that out and make them sweeter and juicier and more consumable by humans. And finally would be cauliflower or broccoli. These are not as GMO modified as the others, but in the example of broccoli, it's derived from broccolini, which is actually longer and has less florets on it than a normal piece of broccoli that we're used to. So here's a couple more examples. Obviously, this cow has a couple hormones, beef production that, where we would want to eat it. The cow has a large udder that is holding about 2 to 3 times the amount of milk that we would normally see out of a typical dairy cow. And then these are just some of the companies that use GMO-enabled products. The products that are made in the United States are cotton, soy, corn, alfalfa, and beets. And you can kind of see how humans don't necessarily eat all those products, but they're fed to an animal, and then that animal is fed to us. And so it's kind of a cycle where we might not realize that we're eating it, but we are ingesting it, and that might cause health problems down the road for humans. All right, so I'm going to show you this little clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson. He is an astrophysicist, but he's also been on councils for both President Obama and George Bush. And this was a question that was asked to him about his stance on GMOs at a summit in France last year.
Que pensez-vous des plantes transgénétiques? I'm amazed how much objection genetically modified foods are receiving from the public. It smacks of the fear factor that exists at every new emergent science where people don't fully understand it, or don't fully know or embrace its consequences, and so therefore reject it. What most people don't know, but they should, is that practically every food you buy in a store for consumption by humans is genetically modified food. There are no wild, seedless watermelons. There's no wild cows. There's no long stem roses growing in the wild, although we don't eat roses. You list all the fruit and all the vegetables and ask yourself, is there a wild counterpart to this? If there is, it's not as large, it's not as sweet, it's not as juicy, and it has way more seeds in it. We have systematically, genetically modified all the foods, the vegetables and animals that we have eaten ever since we cultivated them. It's called flesh. That's how we genetically modify them. So now we can do it in a lab, and all of a sudden you're going to complain. If you're the complainer type, go back and eat the apples that grow wild. You know something? They're this big and they're tart. They're not sweet like red delicious apples. We manufactured those. That's a genetic modification. You realize silk cannot be produced in the wild? The silkworm, as we cultivate it, has no wild counterpart because it would die in the wild. So there's not even any silk anymore. So we're creating and modifying the biology of the world to serve our needs. I don't have a problem with that because we've been doing that for tens of thousands of years. So chill out. Okay, merci.
All right. So I just kind of want to leave you with a couple of ways that if you don't want to be eating this stuff that we don't really know a lot about yet, is there's a couple. They're simple. First is start shopping at a local farmer's market. Those products are grown locally, very organic, and they're easy. There's local farmer's market up in Hayden. There's one in Coeur d'Alene, and I believe they're Thursdays and Sundays. The next would be when you're going to the grocery store, just check the tag. Look to see if it's labeled USDA organic, 365 days is a sticker, and then non-GMO is another sticker that signifies that they don't use any of these products by any of those companies. And then finally, the last one, and probably the most fun and simple one, would just be to grow a garden. You're going to feed yourself and your family for maybe 3 months out of the year, but it's a good way to, just kind of not be GMO. All right, well, thank you. And does anybody have any questions?
No.